Thank you, Jeff, and look, thank you everyone for the opportunity to present this afternoon. I will admit I got caught out with daylight savings, so I thought I had an hour to spare, but the guys down there were ringing me to say, right, let's go. So I'm on the fly here, but hopefully it all works. Look, I'd just like to, before I start, pay respect to our First Nations peoples up here on the Sunshine Coast, where I am meeting today and talking to you from, and that's the Kabi people, as well as our Yinabara people of the Southern Highland. We've got so much to learn from our First Nations people as we talk around sustainability and their connection to country and their stories. And the First Nations people up here have been an important part of our biosphere, and as we move into implementation, they continue to play an important role as well. So welcome everyone to the Sunshine Coast Biosphere. This is an international designation which we've recently received by our community, and it's for our entire local government area. And it's a special place where responsible development and people living sustainably sit alongside active conservation. And in doing so, we've joined a global network of more than 700 biospheres in over 130 countries, and we've become the 5th in Australia. And here on the sunny coast, we're striving to live, work, learn, and play more sustainably in everything that we do. Our Sunshine Coast is a special place. I'm sure Tilba and the community there would say exactly where you're meeting today. But we are absolutely celebrating people and nature. And today I just want to share some of our story in how we achieved this recognition as Australia's most sustainable region. But first up, a little bit about the sunny coast. For those of you who have visited here, you can attest to our natural assets, our biodiversity, our waterways and wetlands and coastal environments. And it's not only their intrinsic values, but also the extensive ecosystem benefits that are so fundamental to us maintaining our valued lifestyle here. And this is a home, where we're living, working and playing. And if you look at these historical photos, this is at Mooloolaba, and looking at the 70s, 80s, 90s and even today, these natural assets were, are, and they remain critical for us as they continue to play a leading role in the Sunshine Coast story. This is from the coastal environments all the way to the hinterland, and we've got a home to more than 340,000 people. And those 340,000 people can access over 60 kilometres of open beaches. They're surrounded by 124,000 hectares of native veg, and that's about 55% of our local government area. They get to play on a network of rivers and creeks. They can enjoy the native plants and animals, and also appreciate the contributions made by these natural assets to the landscape and the character of the region. But look, we need to respond to change, and that change could be physical, environmental, social, financial, cultural. We all have a critical role to play in that ongoing protection of our natural assets, but this is why we also manage the livability of our region. These few photos you can see at the top of the screen, we've got to be planning for where our increasing population is going to live and how they'll move around. We're expecting a population increase of around 500,000 people by 2040, so another 200,000 people. We've got to be responding to a changing climate, and this picture there is a local park after a recent cyclone, and you can see the picnic bench there and the increased river heights and water around the community members' feet. Provide opportunities for our community to continue to earn a living, as well as use technology in the most of innovative and creative of ways. And as we're planning for such outcomes, we need to ensure our natural assets that we enjoy today are here tomorrow, but that we're continuing to preserve and enhance the livability of our region. We're building a resilient Sunshine Coast, but we're also applying a balanced approach as well. A big part of that is our strategic directions, and around environment livability, it's this strategy. It provides us with an integrated, aspirational and transformational approach to deliver a healthy environment and livable Sunshine Coast by 2041, where we're preserving and enhancing our blue and green infrastructure, but also supporting a strong and a vibrant community. So since the Sunshine Coast formed back in 2008 through an amalgamation of councils, we've continued to consult with our community about how best we should be responding to this change and maintaining the livability of the Sunshine Coast. So in 2017, when we developed this strategy, together with the community, they told us a few things. We know that the people are passionate about their Sunshine Coast and wanted to see the distinct qualities of our community of communities and village feel retained and the natural areas preserved. They told us that the protection, management and enhancement of the environment and distinct landscape are fundamental to the future of our region, and to continue the current way the coast natural environment is being managed. They told us it's important that we find the sweet spot that manages the competing needs and desires of individuals, communities, businesses and industries. And the community wants to be more and more involved in our ongoing decisions. The community wants a balanced approach to managing growth to enhance the livability of the Sunshine Coast, not only for today's communities, but also to future generations as well, and a vibrant community. So since the Sunshine Coast formed back in 2008 through an amalgamation of councils, we've continued to consult with our community about how best we should be responding to this change and maintaining the livability of the Sunshine Coast. So in 2017, when we developed this strategy, together with the community, they told us a few things. We know that the people are passionate about their Sunshine Coast and wanted to see the distinct qualities of our community of communities and village feel retained and the natural areas preserved. They told us that the protection, management and enhancement of the environment and distinct landscape are fundamental to the future of our region, and to continue the current way the coast natural environment is being managed. They told us it's important that we find the sweet spot that manages the competing needs and desires of individuals, communities, businesses and industries. And the community wants to be more and more involved in our ongoing decisions. The community wants a balanced approach to managing growth to enhance the livability of the Sunshine Coast, not only for today's communities, but also to future generations as well. So, as part of those long-term strategic directions, the transformational actions, we were asked to try and determine what the best program would be that would help us to get further recognition for the region's values, credentials, vision, and future initiatives. We did an investigation of a whole range of national and international protection mechanisms. And it's fair to say a whole way through this journey, we've always said that we are looking for something that was fit for purpose. Obviously learning off other people, but what was it that the Sunshine Coast Council and its community needed? So we were looking at programs like the National Cities Performance Framework, National Park Cities, ICLEI membership, Global Covenant of Mayors for Climate and Energy, Resilient Cities Program, and this particular UNESCO manned Biosphere Program. When we were looking at the programs, we had some criteria. What was that external party that could provide some verification on what we were trying to achieve, of our status, progress, about our region and what we're trying to achieve from a sustainability perspective. Also, what aligned to our existing Sunshine Coast Council policy framework, and provided us with that international, national and local recognition. We wanted to continue to be held in high regard. If anyone heard of the Sunshine Coast, they knew what it was and what we were collectively trying to achieve as part of that. And we found that we wanted to become a biosphere because for us and our Sunshine Coast local government area, it did provide a platform to take advantage of those benefits, whether that be the international recognition, access to niche markets, further enhancing our environment, partnerships, responsible and sustainable development, also to develop those opportunities from those challenges, climate change, population growth, and in doing so, continuing to learn and share that with our other biospheres across the world. So Council then committed to ongoing investigations around the UNESCO Man and Biosphere Program and continued to engage with the community. When we looked at the Biosphere Reserve, as I said, it's a credential that will support us to protect and enhance our lifestyle, environment and economy. It's that triple bottom line. It's not just all about the environment, but how we respond to the challenges that we're presented with. An international site of excellence, an area of natural beauty where people live and work. If you come to the Sunshine Coast, we've got our urban footprints, we've got our rural areas, and we also have our conservation areas. And we're learning, and it aligns so well to Council's vision as Australia's most sustainable region, which has been adopted by the Biosphere as well. But it hasn't been a short journey. So the Environment Livability Strategy was adopted by Council in 2017 and we'd commenced some work prior to that back in 2016. So it's been 6 years in the making and the job's not done yet. Yes, we've got the accreditation, but implementation is just as big. And we went through 3 phases, nomination development. In October 2019, the Council, on behalf of the community, adopted that to be sent off. And between then and the announcement in June of this year, we've been doing a lot of planning, and I'll touch on some of those aspects that we've been planning for. And now we're into the implementation phase. But so important as part of this process is the engagement and the participation of the community. Following Council's support, to continue the investigations, we undertook formal consultation with the community. We had 89 engagement opportunities, 3,000 people were engaged face-to-face, 1,800 views on the website. Our engagement platform had just over 600 hits. We had a number of written submissions as well. We wanted to, gauge from the community their interest in doing this and support for doing this, and it formed a critical part of the nomination. Traditional owners was important as well, and I'm sure it is down there, and we're continuing to engage with them. So feedback from the community and the key stakeholder engagement largely indicates support for what we're trying to do. So that was a huge tick for us to move forward. This is just a few of the questions that were in our survey, and a few things to highlight. Question number 3 there, that 94% either agreed or strongly agreed that maintaining and enhancing the livability of the Sunshine Coast for future generations is essential. Another one there is that, number 5, international recognition of the Sunshine Coast as a premium brand region, producing clean, green and sustainable produce will benefit agribusiness as an important part of our economy. That was 84%. Number 11, they'd be proud to live in a region with UNESCO Biosphere status. That was 83%. And number 7 down the bottom, international recognition will help local business grow through investment attraction and the creation of niche markets for our region's products, services, facilities and practices. So it's just really good to have collected this data to go out to the community and have this in support of our nomination moving forward. So what does it becoming a biosphere mean for the community? As you are probably aware, biosphere is not statutory. So for the community, this means as long as people are following our local, state or federal laws, then nothing needs to change. Other than we wanting people to continue to operate their businesses, to enjoy the outdoors as they currently are. And as they do this, the way we live, work and play, we want to be doing this in a way where we're adopting sustainable practices more and more. This is a partnership with everyone across the community, and continued effort is required to develop that partnership and the outcomes we're seeking. So why did we want to become the Biosphere there? It seeks to further enhance that international reputation of the Sunshine Coast and leverage those benefits. For us, being a Biosphere will support us and the region to create a legacy, for our children's future. This is how long-term it is. care for our beautiful landscapes and stunning beaches, protect, share and celebrate our cultural heritage of our communities, and leverage that international recognition. You can jump online and see, what some of those benefits and opportunities are, but in terms of lifestyle, ensure we continue to have a healthy environment and a livable Sunshine Coast, attracting more investment to our region. In terms of agriculture, forestry and fisheries, providing that premium brand to increase the value of products and services through, sustainably produced on the Sunshine Coast. And tourism, raising the profile of the sunny coast and increasing the desirability of our region as a holiday destination, somewhere where people can come and experience sustainability in action. But so critical to this, as I said, the community and the engagement through the consultation. But as part of our nomination process, we had a community reference group. So independent chair, and then a range of standing members from business, youth, our local tourism, the development industry, food and agricultural network, environmental groups, universities, residential groups and sport and recreation. It was a reference group where we could continue to test thinking around the nomination. And at the end, when the nomination was supported by council, they were standing right next to council, that was council signing off on behalf of the community for a nomination to be sent off to you, the state government, the Commonwealth government, and then over to UNESCO for consideration. So the purpose of this group was to provide advice to council, assist council to connect more broadly with the community, foster that ownership, build community advocacy, ensure project transparency. Council's delivers a lot of projects, and we wanted to be clear that what we were doing did have that community buy-in, and also assist in managing community perceptions and expectations. This group, and it continues to be part of our governance moving forward, just in a slightly different form, is invaluable, and they've absolutely played a critical role to where we've got to today. Something really important that the group did was sat down and further supporting why a biosphere, governing principles where we're seeking to achieve that balance of the environmental, social and economic, where we want to be internationally renowned with our aim of a place where people live, work, learn and play sustainably, and really 4 clear objectives around the people, the conservation, the development and logistical support. So governance has continued to be a really important part of the biosphere. Through the development of the nomination and through the planning phases, it was delivered as a council project. So we had our project control groups with representation from our councillors and executive and officers, and the community reference group continued to provide input into that process. But as we headed to becoming a biosphere, we had to give consideration to what's the governance after that. We wanted to make sure that while council supported the process, it was a community biosphere. So we did some work with an external consultant to look at a whole range of different governance options. But what we wanted to ensure is that the governance arrangements put in place were balanced, responsive, inclusive and transparent. And these are governance principles that the community reference group helped to develop as well. And in doing so, this is our governance structure today, that we're putting some of these elements in place. We consider this an internal model. So Sunshine Coast Council, you can see at the top there, they're responsible for any statutory decision making. So if there's budgets or anything that need to be signed off, that's what council's role is. But when you step underneath that, you've got our Biosphere Coordinating Committee. So that's chaired by our mayor. It does have our Chief Executive Officer on there. It has the chair of our Community Advisory Group. It has the chairs of our 2 First Nations groups, Kabi Kabi and Yinabara. and it also has a state representative and our group executives that are responsible for the environment, the social and economic aspects of our business. We do see that as separate to the traditional council project management, although council officers do provide that secretariat role to make it happen. To the left, the Biosphere Community Advisory Group, so that was what we now call the reference group. So they've just formed recently and will continue to provide advice back into the committee from that community perspective. The Biosphere lead, that's the council officer, that's myself, another officer, and we're all supported with what council does right across our business. With a vision to be Australia's most sustainable region, council is already contributing a whole range of outcomes across that environmental, social, economic space, and will continue to do so as our contribution to the Sunshine Coast Biosphere. In terms of the community, this was really an important part of our governance structure. We wanted to make sure that whoever you are in the community, whether you're an individual, a student, part of a family in industry, you had that opportunity to connect in with the advisory group members, but also the Biosphere lead as well. If you've got any particular issues or ideas that you wanted to raise to be considered in the Sunshine Coast Biosphere. Really important though too is our performance measurement. As we sort of set out to be a biosphere, but where are we today? And where do we want to be in 5 years and 10 years time when we have our review through UNESCO of our biosphere? The 5 years to do this too is probably that interim mark and to see how we can make those adjustments over time. But developing this performance measurement framework, we wanted to ensure our measures and targets were aligning to the aim, objectives and focus areas of the biosphere, which has had that community input as well. We wanted to ensure that it was contributing and aligned to the UN Sustainable Development Goals, and also aligning to council strategies and plans. As I said, we've got a really comprehensive policy framework, and just wanting to make this performance measurement framework integrated. So you can see there across the people, conservation, development and logistical support, there's a number of different aspects to what we're trying to measure for the biosphere, from healthy, livable and sustainable Sunshine Coast to conservation elements which link in with the amount, the health of our waterways, how much land we've got in protection, through to our economy, as well as that logistical support as well. And we're just in the process of finalising our first benchmark for this measurement framework in 2022 with some targets set so that we can continue to measure that performance over time. And I think the last slide I've got here is a transition implementation plan. As I said, 6 years in the making and a lot of work achieved across that time. But finding out in June, these are the areas we've been focusing on. Governance arrangements. I showed you the government structure, but putting in place the coordinating committee, the reference group, some internal working groups of council, and making sure we have the right representation on that community reference group as well, and filling that with appropriate skill sets. The performance measurement baseline, which I spoke about, branding alignment with the aim and objectives. So we've got that brand, but one of the important things we've got to do is promote that brand. Get people across our community to be not only proud of where they're living and working and playing, but understanding that through this biosphere we are a special place, and linking that special place to this biosphere, which is our biosphere, the community biosphere, and doing that through a targeted comms and community engagement campaign. And then implementation. What we don't want to do is come up with a list of actions which just cannot be achieved. Council's already contributing, and this is an opportunity where we can go back into the community, and whether it's talking with our local tourist providers or industry or businesses or schools, and get them on board. An example of a local school here is that they're striving to be more and more sustainable, and in doing that, they are already contributing to the Sunshine Coast Biosphere, just as an example. Visit Sunshine Coast, our local tourism body, they're looking to see how they can work with all the tourist operators to ensure that their businesses are sustainable as well. So it's all these small little pieces from right across the right across our community that will and will need to continue to contribute to the Sunshine Coast Biosphere for us to realise what we've set out to do in being internationally recognised as a UNESCO Biosphere. So there's a really quick presentation. Hopefully that captured the why we did it, how we did it, and we're going from here. But yeah, thank you for the opportunity to present today, and happy to answer any questions you might have.
Well, David, thanks very much for that. I'm not sure if you can hear us, but there's rapturous applause. What I'm just now going to offer the audience is a chance to, rather than me interpret your question, if you could come around to the microphone, not near where the cables are, but around here, then you can ask your question directly. And if you feel modest about that, I'll stand next to you and we can actually interpret the question, all right? But, so whilst you're all thinking about the questions that you've got, Dave, please, I am quite serious, please come and ask your questions. What I wanted to know is whether or not you actually had relationships with the Queensland State Government and how you manage those.
Yeah, so the state government is an important part of this process. Developing the nomination, and once we had that signed off, we had to send that down to Brisbane. It had to be signed off by the Minister, which was then sent down to the Commonwealth. State government is very big. We're already working locally with a range of different state government departments across those different spheres of the environment, social and economic. And so we will continue to do so. They are an important part of our governance framework, and we are seeking that representation, which on that Biosphere Coordinating Committee, we're yet to fill that. But another feather in our cap too, I guess, is across Australia, we've got 3 biospheres in a row with Sunshine Coast, Noosa and Great Sandy. It's already being promoted by local tourism operators as the Biosphere Corridor. And so how we continue to raise that asset to the state government and partner with them is something that we'll need to continue to work on, Jeff.
Okay, thank you very much for that. So please come up, don't feel embarrassed about that. Whilst people are coming up, I've got another question. We had a question raised about your core areas and whether in fact they were genuinely core areas. So did you come across that issue before in your discussions? Namely, if you've got your conservation areas, the state government hasn't weakened the conservation element of those at all?
Yeah, so across our Sunshine Coast government area, as I said earlier, we've got our conservation areas made up of council reserves, national parks, state national parks and conservation parks. We've got our rural areas as well as our urban footprint. In terms of our core and the criteria that we applied, the majority of that is in our core, but there are some conservation areas that are in our urban footprint that we still recognise, but these are special management and care areas. So if you look at our map, you can see clearly where they've been captured and represented in that.
Lovely, thanks, Raki. Here's your first question.
Hello, David. Shanna is my name. I've lived on the Sunny, a beautiful place. Tourism is, you mention it quite a lot through this, and we've heard about it all the way through today. I'm interested in whether, I know that if this community decides that this is something that's worthwhile exploring, then they would have that sense of ownership and really want to commit to that. But have you had any insight, strategies and challenges around, I know you talk about an intensive comms strategy, but around the visitors to the area and how you can bring them along to have the same level of respect for the Biosphere Reserve as local people might have.
So I think, in terms of the quality there, is your question how we can bring visitors to the Sunshine Coast along our biosphere story?
No, I think that you do an excellent job, and so does this council, in bringing people to the areas. What I'm saying is, what have you put in place, if anything, that ensures that visitors that come go along on the journey, the Biosphere Reserve journey, rather than just coming because it's a great place and it's presented as this fabulous international place to visit? How do you bring them into acting in a way that supports the parameters of the Biosphere Reserve?
Yeah, sure. So I think, so we've been on our sustainability journey as a council, you know, on behalf of our community since 2008, you know, and it's fair to say, you know, this is my test, my neighbour test, that a lot of people enjoy living on the Sunshine Coast, but don't realise the challenges which we're going to face, you know, in terms of more people, climate change, a growing economy, etc. So I think there's two parts, you know, when we continue to promote the biosphere. There's the people that live here, you know, and they've told us that they'd be proud to live in a biosphere. We've got to continue to work with them, whoever they are, wherever they're living, to ensure that they're, you know, that living, working, playing sustainably the best they can, you know, and in doing so, bringing them on board and for them to see their connection to the biosphere, how they can play their role and contribute, then they will become advocates, you know, for the Sunshine Coast, and help us, you know, when people visit, you know, to be advocating for the way we want them to live, work and play while they're visiting. And as we promote the biosphere, it is just that. Some of the conversations we've had with Visit Sunshine Coast is, you know, when they arrive here, they know it's a special place, they know it's a biosphere and they're enjoying it. But what is it that we want them to contribute to? And that might not be council, but it might be Visit Sunshine Coast and their partnerships with all their operators that can provide that clear and consistent messaging for where they are and the contributions they can make. So in terms of things we've got in place right away, I would say no, but there's the partnerships which are being established. And, you know, there's obviously more work we need to do. You know, we've been on this journey, as I said, for 6 years, and now that we've become a biosphere doesn't mean that we can all sit back and, you know, there's nothing more to do. There's so much work we can do. And, you know, as I say, you know, more hands make light work, and that's what we'll be doing, or wanting to do right across the community.
Thanks, Dave. Great question, that. Now, this is the last question because we've got to move on fairly soon for a discussion with the group.
Hello David, my name's Liz. I actually work for the local council. I do have two questions if I'm allowed. I actually have the words sustainable and growth in my title at council, so I'm very excited to be having this conversation, and I'm going to get your contact details from Jeff. My first question is around the funding of the process. Was this ratepayer funded? Or was there some external support or grant funding for this, and is there ongoing funding from any kind of entity to help, I guess, through the governance structure and the ongoing work of the committee?
So, Jack, can I just confirm, was it a question of how has the Biosphere nomination, planning and then implementation been funded?
Correct.
Yep. So the nomination and planning phase has been a council-funded project. So there was a 3-year period where council has invested approximately $500,000 to support that process. Moving forward, when you look about the range of council projects and initiatives that are being delivered, like, it's very easy to see that council's 5-year corporate plan and our annual operational planning and capital investments are all contributing to the biosphere. So that's the role that the council plays. And then it would also be looking across our community to see what others can contribute as well. We'll continue to seek funding and grants, to support community groups or council projects. But it was a council commitment, where they provided that funding, which has made this possible in realising this designation.
Thanks, David. Can you hear me?
Yes.
My second question is actually around housing, and I guess what impact does the nomination of Biosphere have on council decisions around greenfields and rezoning? 200,000 population is a lot to house into the future. I'm interested to know, in terms of livability and sustainability, does that result in greater consolidation and higher densities, or is that impacting also on decisions around greenfield subdivisions?
Yeah. So I think the question was around housing. Sorry, it's just a little bit not clear, but Council's environment livability strategy that I touched on before has a theme in there around neighbourhoods and housing. So it does set out what those strategic directions are. Working with the state government as well, there's a South East Queensland regional plan, and there's targets in there for both urban consolidation and greenfield developments. And so those targets is what we are working to. We're in the process at the moment of developing a new planning scheme. So the old one, or the one we've got at the moment, was done in 2014, and they generally have that 10-year life. So our strategic directions will be reflected in this new planning scheme. But there is, with that consolidation, it is a new way of living. We've got urban consolidation, looking at what medium density living looks like. But the community's been really clear in telling us, that they don't want to, you'll hear, if you're up here in conversations, they'll say, we don't want to be a Gold Coast. We often ask that question, well, what do you mean you don't want to be a Gold Coast? Is it just the high rises? Because we still need to provide a community where people can live, they can work, they can make their way around efficiently, and importantly, they can connect in with our natural assets as well. So it's part of the broader change, which we all have to be aware of and contributing to, and behaviour change is difficult, but I think we have to continue those conversations and play our part in ensuring that the Sunshine Coast we love, albeit in a slightly different form in the future, those values and lifestyle continues to be there.
Dave, look, thank you very much for that. We have to move on. Again, everybody appreciates the fact that you've given a very clear presentation, and it's been very helpful for us. But unfortunately, we're going to now cut you off. And thank you very much, though, once again. That's really appreciated. Thanks very much.